Hello and welcome, and this is Peter. First thing I want to say is thank you very much for listening to me. I really appreciate you, so thank you for listening. The topic of today's audio is how did I help a bank make an extra $1 billion a year? Okay? How did I help a bank make an extra $1 billion a year? And that's quite a claim, right? That's quite a claim. To say that I played some role, a significant role, very significant role it was, in helping a bank make an extra $1 billion profit a year when their profit was $1 billion. So what I helped them do, helped them make an extra $1 billion a year. Okay, we're going to talk about that. And it's going to be a little longer audio, and it's going to be telling me a story audio. It's going to be an audio like a story. Okay, so I could just tell you, like this, I invented a new way of designing data models which massively reduced the cost of doing queries 100-fold, and then the bank could afford to buy the mainframes. I was working for IBM. A bank could afford to buy the mainframes to do the analytics they wanted because I invented a new way of building data models. That's the whole story. So if you just wanted the whole story is back in 1991, I invented a new way of designing databases. I gave that to one of our big IBM customers, the National Australia Bank, to help them build their analytical databases for their customer management. And out of doing that, they made an extra $1 billion. That's the whole story. But of course, that's not much fun, is it, knowing the whole story so coldly like that? It's much nicer to hear the story, okay? So I'm going to tell you a story, tell you the story of how this was done, all right? How it came about, then how it was done. Now, my very first data warehouse project started at Easter 1991, and it was an unmitigated disaster for the first 6 months or so. Because what did I do? I came out of IT. What did I do? I built a third normal form database. I put the customers in the customer table. I put the policies in the policy table. And I put the relationship table for customers to policies in the relationship table. And then we asked it some questions. Yeah? That's what you did in 1991. Nice, beautiful third normal form 3-table data warehouse was kind of how we started. Okay? And you know what happened, because now we know what happens when you do that. We didn't then. And what happens when you do that is you get garbage performance, right? The performance was garbage. Because what did we have to do such, like it was a life insurance company, these were life insurance policies, and investment policies related to life insurance and things like that. So what kind of questions do you want to ask? Well, you want to ask questions about demographics. You know, what demographics do we have for policy coverage? You want to ask about product categories and product hierarchies, and you want to ask about where these people live. Okay, you want to ask about their income proxies. This was all new in 1991. I mean, in 1991, what did we do? We managed transactions because the computers were really expensive. You had to be managing something of high value. This analytics stuff was very new in 1991. So the upshot of that was, every time we asked these 3 tables a question, well, that took about an hour, and it cost in Australian dollars at the time about $400 because the mainframe was paid for on a chargeback basis. When the business was given accounting codes for their systems, and when the system consumed some mainframe resources, then the accounting code would be chalked up to that business unit, right? And so it was costing $400 per question. And the customer was like, love what you did. It's providing us great information, but we can't afford an hour and $400 every time we want to ask a question. So you guys at IBM have to make this go faster, or we'll talk to the guys at Teradata because they're telling us they can do it faster, cheaper, better, right? And so with the threat of Teradata being dangled over the top of us, because that's what you do when you're a customer, I was given the task of setting about figuring out how do we take these they had 1 million customers, 1.1 million enforced policies, and 1.1 million. Yeah, 1 million customers, 1.1 million enforced policies, and 6.4 or 5 million rows in the relationship table in the middle. And we're trying to do this analytics, okay? So me being a young IBM systems engineer, still wet behind the ears, I went around all the senior guys and said, well, this is what we've got, and these are the questions we're asking, and this is the consumption on the mainframe. Can you guys help me? You're the guys who know more about DB2 than me. And they all went, no, you've done exactly what I would do. There's nothing extra to be done here apart from them to buy a lot of hardware, buy more hardware. And I'm like, well, they're not going to buy another engine just to do these queries. That's kind of out of the question, right? They're quibbling over $400 per query. They're not going to put down $2 million for an engine to get this to go faster. So we have to do better. And everyone went, no, we don't know how to do any better. So I thought about the problem, and I was starting to notice the patterns of the queries and how they started at a high level and when drilled down to a low level, all that sort of stuff that you start noticing when you first start looking at doing data analytics, right? So the idea I came up with at the time, remember this is 1991, and the idea I came up with at the time was let's prepare all the data, and this was all on tapes, prepare all the data, and then let's create summary data which answers questions at multiple levels. So we have a high level we have a stack of summaries, and we had about 10 or 15. We'll have a stack of summaries, all complete, all containing all data, but as you go down the levels of summaries, more of the fields, more of the dimensional fields are filled in. So we had just one table, and we would fill these dimensional fields in and expose them through views. So to the user, it would look like I had 15 tables, but I actually had one table. It had a level column at the front of it. The user could figure out which table he wanted by looking at the fields on it. So the users would learn, well, if I wanted information at this level, I got to go to this table, right? And if I want information at this level, I got to go to this table. And they would learn that soon enough. So we did this. Now, underlying inside DB2, of course, we had a level column, and the level column was in the where clause of the view, and the physical table was partitioned manually by the level column. So when I asked a question at a certain level, yes, DB2 would scan the whole table, but it only scanned the rows that were necessary to scan to answer that question, right? So each query did a scan of the partition of all the rows in the partition that could be contributed, and then it applied the where clauses, etc. We didn't even worry too much about indexes because there wasn't much point, right? So this I called multi-level summaries, and it worked really well. You could do we prepared all the stuff on the tapes, and then in the monthly, it was a monthly update, and we had a total refresh monthly update. So on the monthly run, just after the close of the month, so you had the accounting and the close for the beginning of the month, and then we were allowed to run this update on the first weekend after the close, right? So that's kind of how that worked. Now these queries that were taking an hour and costing $400, they were mostly between 1 and 3 seconds now, okay? Between 1 and 3 seconds. Like 95% of queries were done in under 10 seconds. And then, of course, there was a small percentage of queries that needed access to the detail tables that were joined that still took $400, right? But only a very small number. So overall, this was a big improvement. And the customer said, yep, that's great. We like it. We'll buy it. And we'll use it. So they were happy, right? And now, of course, we're IBM, and we've just come up with an idea that nobody else had in the country, an idea called multi-level summary tables. So, what did 1992 look like for me? 1992 for me looked like, we're going to go and tell all our IBM customers about this new idea that we've come up with, that this customer says is really valuable to them, right? That's what you do when you're IBM. So I did a tour of many of the major customers during 1992, and I spoke at a lot of user groups and things like that. The DB2, anything that had DB2 in it from IBM, I got either a half hour or a 1 hour slot at, and I went and talked to everybody about how we did this. Now, interestingly, one of the companies that I talked to, I did this presentation. This guy called Steve came along to the presentation, and he goes, "Hey, that's pretty interesting. Can you tell me more about it?" So we showed him more about it, and then he says, "Okay, well, that's good." And then I was doing another presentation somewhere else, and the same guy, Steve, showed up. And I said, oh, well, look, Steve, you've seen my presentation before. He says, "Yeah, I know. I came specifically to see it again." I'm like, "Oh, really?" So I don't get many people wanting to watch my presentation twice. He said, "Well, we've got something we're thinking about, so I've come to see it again. I've got some questions afterwards." I went, "Okay, well, you work for the National Australia Bank, one of the big four banks in Australia, one of our biggest customers. I'm happy to answer any questions you have." Okay. It's like, great. And then we spent some time afterwards and we chatted. And okay. And so he says, "I'd like you to come down to the bank and spend a day with me." I said, "Sure." And, just get it approved. But you're the National Australia Bank. You're going to get whatever you ask for. And so nobody's going to say no to you from IBM. He goes, "Yeah, I know." So comes the day that I'm down with Steve in Melbourne. And what we did was he asked me to do the same presentation again, which he sat through for a third time to a bunch of people, about 10, 12 people, dozen people maybe. So I did the same 1 hour presentation again to like a dozen people. And then we went off to a room and he had all this stuff printed. And he took me through the tables they had in their customer analytics system. And he's saying, "Okay, well, here's what we've got." And he's going through it. And I noticed each page is numbered. I'm like, why is each printed page here like manually, by hand, numbered? And he's like, "Oh, yeah, this is really confidential. We have to account for each page." He said, "When I leave here today, I've got to go back and account for each page. So don't be taking any of them." I'm like, "Well, of course not." And so he was taking me through all the pages of the data model. We got a whiteboard, and so I'm drawing pictures about how the summary levels could work and what we would be putting the summary levels. And from what they had, because they had a much more complicated set of systems than just a life insurance company, so they would have to build a whole bunch of different summary tables and merge data together and all this stuff. But we basically spent the day going through with me drawing pictures and explaining to Steve, "Well, if I was you, this is what I would do. Okay, given this information that you're putting in front of me. Obviously, you want to take this away and think about it and talk to other people. But in the amount of time that I've got to think about this and give you some advice and guidance, this is what I think." And he's like, "Yeah, great." And he's taking all the pages. It's like the paper on the whiteboard, taking all the pages for the paper and all the diagrams, etc. We finish about 6 o'clock and everybody's happy, right? So I go off and go, "Oh, okay, great. I spent a day at the National Australia Bank. Fantastic." And then about a year later, the NAB in 1993, it was a recession, right? You got to remember it's a recession. In 1993, the NAB announces its results, and all the other banks take a bath, and the NAB's performance improves just a bit. And I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder if that's got anything to do with the analytics that I helped them with. But it was noted at the time that it was unusual how well the NAB had done in comparison to the other big three banks, because usually the big four banks went in lockstep. None of them could get an advantage over another. And then in early 1994, I was doing a call at the Commonwealth Bank, which is a former government bank, and it's the bank that the government pays pensions into. So there's a lot of public sector money go through the Commonwealth Bank. And I was having this meeting, and these guys at the Commonwealth Bank are going, oh, those guys at the National Australia Bank, they are stupid. They are taking a bath. And I'm like, that's interesting. Why do you say that? And I said, why do you say that? He said, we are getting so many customers from the National Australia Bank that these people are actually upset. They're angry enough and upset enough at the National Australia Bank that they're actually closing their accounts there and coming over to us. And we're getting thousands of them every week, literally every week across the country. We're picking up a couple of thousand customers from the National Australia Bank. Fantastic. Those guys just have no idea what they're doing. And I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, that's really interesting, because obviously part of what we were looking at for the National Australia Bank was differentiated customer service levels. One of the things that we've talked about like forever, certainly since 1992, is you should treat the customers who give you more profit better than the customers who are costing you money. Strangely enough, you should do that, right? Before the days of customer analytics, we used to treat all customers relatively the same because you didn't know how much the customer was worth. So you had to treat everyone, quote, well, unquote. But one of the things we worked out in banking was a lot of your customers are costing you money, and it's either up or out. So part of the conversation with the NAB was the up or out conversation. How do we do that? How do we calculate customer value indexes such that we can move the customer up or out? And that was part of the diagrams that I drew. So I knew that that's what they wanted to do. So here I was a couple of years later sitting at the Commonwealth Bank with the Commonwealth Bank saying, oh, we are just killing the NAB. We're taking so many of their customers from them. They're upset, etc., etc. Fantastic. And I'm like, oh, so the NAB has finally figured out the customer value indexes and they've implemented the differentiated customer service levels, and you're getting the guys who are unprofitable. Of course, I didn't say that. I couldn't say that to the Commonwealth Bank. I just smiled and went, wow, that's really interesting. That's really amazing. How about that? Is all you can say, because, you keep the confidentiality of your customers. So anyhow, so that was early 1994, and I'm starting to notice this is really interesting. And then, of course, the 94 results come out, and the NAB has taken a big step forward. And over the next few years, the NAB went from 1 billion Australian dollars profit a year in 1992, which was standard for all the banks. The big four were all about the same. 5 years later, they were making $2 billion a year profit, and the other three were still stuck in the doldrums, around the same as the 1992 numbers. And everyone was hailing the NAB as, what is the NAB doing that has enabled them to take such a massive lead in the marketplace? And their stocks went up and their profitability went up, and everyone was happy at the NAB. The other three were not too happy, but at the NAB everyone was happy. And that was my little role in it. My little role in it was figuring out that if I didn't want to spend $20 million on new hardware, then what I could do is I could invent the idea of multi-level summaries and navigate up and down the summaries appropriately to get the answer from the level of summary, from the next level of summary that would answer my question. And so I would spend the minimum amount of computer time in my query to go get the answer that I wanted. The minimum amount of computer time, the minimum amount of disk I/O, and all the rest of it. And all that work I would put into the monthly run, right? Because this was also a monthly update. Okay? So that was my little bit. But there's a punchline. I like to make these stories funny. Okay? I like to make these stories humorous. Because if they're a little bit funny, a little bit humorous, a little bit entertaining, then you'll be more likely to listen, right? So there's a punchline to this one. And the punchline is this. I left IBM and started my own company in 1994. And then I joined Hitachi in 1996. And one of the customers I obviously wanted to go back to with Hitachi was the National Australia Bank. So finally, I convinced the branch manager in Melbourne to let me do a sales call at the National Australia Bank around data warehousing and business intelligence, because the National Australia Bank had now bought our Hitachi Skyline mainframes by this time. So we go into this meeting. There's about a dozen people there, and I chose my seat further down the table to the left of where the chief was going to sit, the NAB chief was going to sit, so I could observe what was going on while I was talking and still looking at her. But I let the rep sit next to her, which was a mistake. I should have made the rep sit next to me, and that'll come out in the story. So anyhow, this woman's running BI for the NAB, and she's trying to be what she figures a man would be like in that position. And she's all abrupt and gruff and confrontational, etc. So, and just her body language and everything else, this is what this woman's going to be. I'm like, okay, fine, I can deal with that. So we all sit down, we do the hellos and welcomes and shake hands, etc., etc. And we all sit down, and this woman opens with, so, Mr. Hitachi, why should we listen to you about anything about business intelligence? What do you got that you could tell us? Kind of very arrogantly. Okay? It's like, why should I be listening to you? Why are we having this meeting, and why should I be listening to you? And I said, oh, that's really easy, because I'm the man who gave you the ideas to increase your profit from $1 billion a year to $2 billion a year. That's why you should be listening to me. And she looked at me and said, do you have any, really arrogantly, do you have any evidence for what you just said, sir? And I go, sure, because Steve, the guy I'd given the information to, was sitting at her right hand, was sitting right on her right-hand side. And I said, sure, Steve is the man I gave the ideas to. And she turned around and looked at him, and he went, yep, Pete's the man. She goes, really? He said, yep, he's the guy that gave us the ideas that helped us get to where we are today. He's the guy. And she's like, huh, okay then, Mr. Nolan. Well, why are you here? Thank you for what you did. Why are you here? And I said, well, interestingly enough, we haven't been idle in the last 5 years. I said 5 years ago, Steve and I sat down and I gave him some ideas about what I thought you could do as an IBMer and an IBM customer, what I thought you could do to improve your analytics for your business performance and therefore improve your business performance. And turns out you have with those ideas, right? She goes, well, yes, that's happened. Well, I'm here because in the last 5 years, we've invented some new ideas. And we have some new ideas which are better than the ideas I gave Steve 5 years ago, because we've been working on this over the last 5 years, and I'm here with Hitachi now. You're a large Hitachi customer. I'm here with Hitachi to share with you these better ideas if you're interested. She's like, okay, what do you got? So then I get to get up and do my slides. And what I was talking about, we'd invented a piece of software we called the High Star Warehouse Toolkit. In Hitachi, everything had high on it. So basically the idea was multi-level summary tables, multi-level data in a dimensional model was the new idea. And, as I went through it, and I explained to Steve, for the other people, because Steve was the person who knew this best, I said, it's really just like taking all the dimensional information, splitting it out into different tables, adding hundreds of new attributes in those dimension tables, maintaining them all at summary levels so that you can access your transactions up to the highest level summary through all these extra attributes. So basically what I'm here today telling you is I can give you hundreds and hundreds of more attributes by which to analyze your data with better performance, and we know how to build the ETL system to do that. And Steve is like, his eyes are boggling. He's like, really? We can do this? We know how to do this? I went, yep. I said, what we gave you 5 years ago, were the best ideas I had at the time, but they are the Model T next to the Ferrari. So what I gave you last time is a Model T, and that was great for the time because it was the first one. Model T was first, and it was great. But what we've got now is a Ferrari. And Steve is like, yeah, this sounds really interesting. And after all this excitement started building in the room, I realized my mistake, because the rep then tries to make a sale for a whole software, for a whole development project. On the spot, he tries to make this sale. Where what we wanted to do was just involve them in the next step, which was to get me into the account, to review all their data again, and then start designing models for them and doing some prototyping and things like that. And, they'd pay a little bit of money for all that, but not a lot. And then if they liked the prototype, we'd offer them the deal. Okay? That's how, everybody who is in business intelligence knows that when you have an installed customer and you don't have any competition for what it is that you do, you don't go in up front trying to get the big deal. You go in up front to get them on the hook, so to speak, but to give them some valuable information, to show them that you've got something new to offer. You then go through the prototype for that so that they understand this is something new, and they're not going to talk to anybody else. So if they like the prototype, they'll buy the whole thing. So you don't try and sell them the whole thing. You sell them the prototype, and then you sell them the whole thing when they're an installed account, right? And this rep tried to go sell them the whole thing right up front and really aggravated this woman. And in the end, she just, thanks very much for coming, basically get out. And I was like, I can't believe it. We are not going to get a deal for this, because what I should have done is put the rep next to me and kick him under the table when he started talking, to tell him to shut up, because I've got this, right? So that's the punchline. The punchline is I invented this new way of doing models, and by having the advantage, the National Australia Bank doubled its profit, added $1 billion a year in profit in 5 years. I went back with better ideas, the Model T versus the Lamborghini, and I couldn't get a deal. I couldn't get that deal. And of course, what happened over the next 5 years, from 2007 to 2002, is the other banks figured out what was going on. And the other banks caught on, and they did the same thing. Started kicking out the unprofitable customers. They sent them all to the Commonwealth Bank. And there was a bit of a joke towards the end of the 90s in Australia, if a customer's not profitable, what do you do with them? You send them to the Commonwealth Bank, because that's the government bank and they can't refuse you, right? And so the Commonwealth Bank was saddled with all these bad customers. And this was the era when somebody made a statement, a banking service is not a right, it's a business product. A lot of people saw banking as you have a right to have a bank account. And the answer was, no, you don't have a right to have a bank account, you actually have to pay for it. So this was, and there was a lot of bad press too for the banks, because this was the day of fees, introducing increased fees and all the rest of it, so that the people who were unprofitable customers might be motivated to move off to the Commonwealth Bank. So yeah, that's my story about how I helped the National Australia Bank make an extra $1 billion a year. Okay? Now, of course, I didn't stop there. I didn't stop doing this stuff in 1992. We've been doing this stuff for a very long time. And I'm going to do another story next about how I helped the richest man in Australia do one of the biggest corporate turnarounds in the country's history. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I know what I'm doing. If you'd like a hand, of course, this is also a promotional audio. So if you'd like some help in making your company, large, complex company, more profitable, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and I'll have a look at it. And if I can help you, I will. But if I can't help you, I'll tell you. I'll tell you, that's not me. So look at my resume. It's mostly telco over the last years. Telco, retail, with a little bit of financial services back in the 90s. right? I haven't done financial publishers. I haven't done financial services much since 2002. So I'm not really that much into banking anymore. Okay. So, but all the customer analytics still work. But mostly telco, mostly retail. If that's you and you're interested and you want to know how you can improve the profitability of your business, then by all means give me a call. We can work something out. All right? Now with that, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.